What if a story you thought was just a myth, a cautionary tale whispered for millennia, turned out to be terrifyingly real? We all know their names: Sodom and Gomorrah, two cities so steeped in corruption that heaven itself supposedly opened up and washed them away in a torrent of fire. For thousands of years, we've used their names as a shorthand for sin and divine retribution. But what if the evidence of that cataclysmic day wasn't just buried in the pages of an ancient book, but seared into the very earth itself? What if science, in its relentless search for truth, stumbled upon the fingerprints of God's judgment? In this investigation, we will peel back the layers of time, separating legend from provable fact. We will walk in the footsteps of the one man who escaped the inferno, a man named Lot, who was forced to watch as his entire world, and even his own wife, was turned to dust and salt before his very eyes. We are going to explore what the biblical narrative truly reveals, what modern archaeology is unearthing at this very moment, and what the geological record has preserved, a scar on the face of the planet that has never healed. And I promise you, by the end of this journey, you will discover a final, shocking revelation about what exists today on the exact ground where these cities of sin once stood, a mystery that defies simple explanation. But before we descend into the past, let's get a sense of how far this ancient story has traveled. Right now, in the comments below, tell us two things: where in the world you are watching from and what time it is for you. Let's create a map of our global community, connected by this one timeless, terrifying mystery. Go ahead, drop your location and time in the comments. We'll wait. All right, let's begin. Before the ash, there was abundance. Before the judgment, there was unimaginable pride. Long before the sky rained fire, two cities shimmered like jewels in the heart of the desert plain: Sodom and Gomorrah. Geographically, they were situated in the lush Jordan Plain, a region so fertile and well-watered it was compared to the very Garden of Eden. This was the southern stretch of what we now know as the Dead Sea, an area that, back then, was a paradise of agriculture and commerce. These were not mere villages, they were bustling metropolitan centers. Their economies boomed, their fields were green and irrigated, their storehouses overflowed, and their citizens lived in a state of prosperous comfort that was the envy of the ancient world. At first glance, they were the very picture of progress, monuments to human ingenuity and ambition. It was this dazzling vision of success that convinced Lot, the nephew of the patriarch Abraham, to make his home there. He looked upon the land, saw its potential, and chose the path of worldly prosperity. It was a promising environment, a place of opportunity where few would dare to venture without being impressed. He could not have imagined the profound spiritual cost that this seemingly wise decision would eventually exact upon him and his family. The Bible, in the book of Genesis, is chillingly direct. The people of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord, but their evil was not just a collection of individual transgressions. It was woven into the very fabric of their culture. It was a society saturated with an arrogant pride, a profound and corrosive selfishness, an insatiable lust for more, and a complete and utter indifference to justice and mercy. In the book of the prophet Ezekiel, God himself pulls back the curtain and reveals the precise nature of Sodom's sin. And it's perhaps not what many assume. He says, "Behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and needy." The core problem of Sodom wasn't merely its debauchery, but its moral apathy. It was the absence of compassion, the chilling lack of mercy, and a towering arrogance that placed its own comfort above all else, even in the face of God. For centuries, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah was largely dismissed by secular historians as an allegorical tale, a powerful myth designed to teach a moral lesson. However, in the last century, the spade of the archaeologist has begun to tell a different, more unsettling story. all around the southern basin of the Dead Sea, in places with names like Bab-edj-Dra and Numira. The ruins of ancient cities have been found, and these are not just any ruins. They bear witness to a civilization that was not abandoned, but annihilated. They were violently and suddenly incinerated by a force of unimaginable power. Excavations have revealed layers of ash several feet thick. They've unearthed collapsed buildings, charred human skeletons frozen in their final moments, and pottery fragments that tell a story of a swift, fiery end. Radiocarbon dating places the destruction of these sites around 2000 BC, aligning remarkably well with the biblical timeline of Abraham and Lot. In some of these dig sites, archaeologists were stunned to find city walls that had been vitrified. The stone and mud brick had literally been turned to glass, as if they had been flash-heated to temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or 1,100 degrees Celsius. There is no conventional, natural explanation for this. No ordinary city fire, no known ancient weapon could produce such a complete and superheated devastation. This has led some secular scholars to propose a celestial cause, a massive airburst explosion, perhaps caused by a meteor or comet fragment detonating in the atmosphere, similar to the Tunguska event in Siberia in 1908. Others, of course, maintain that it was exactly what the Bible describes, a direct supernatural act of divine judgment. These incredible discoveries do more than just lend historical credibility to the existence of Sodom and Gomorrah. They confirm that something uniquely and terrifyingly catastrophic did indeed happen in that very region at that very time. Yet even within this ocean of corruption, there was one man who stood apart, Lot. Though he lived amidst the depravity, he held on to his faith in God, and God, in his perfect justice and boundless mercy, determined that this one righteous man would not perish with the wicked. And so a divine plan was set in motion. 2 heavenly messengers were dispatched to the city. Their mission was twofold and terrifyingly clear: rescue Lot and his family, and then utterly destroy that which could no longer be redeemed. The final night of Sodom had arrived. As twilight began to bleed across the desert sky, 2 strangers appeared at the gates of Sodom. They carried no baggage, they offered no explanation of their origin, but their very presence seemed to alter the air around them, carrying an aura of authority and otherworldly power. These were no ordinary travelers. They were emissaries from the court of heaven, sent on a final grim mission to verify the outcry against Sodom's sin and to execute its impending doom. Lot was sitting at the city gate, a place of social gathering and business. His eyes fell upon them, and something deep within him, perhaps a vestige of the piety he learned from Abraham, recognized that these were men of significance. He immediately rose to greet them. In a profound act of hospitality, a virtue that had all but vanished from his adopted city, he bowed down and insisted that they spend the night in the safety of his home. At first, the 2 men politely refused, stating they would spend the night in the public square. But Lot knew the predatory wickedness of the city after dark. He pleaded with them, his insistence born not just of courtesy, but of a desperate fear for what would happen to them if they remained exposed. Finally, they relented and entered his house. Lot prepared a feast for them, a symbol of honor and welcome. But the peace of his home was destined to be short-lived. Before they had even laid down to rest, the house was surrounded. The Bible says it was all the men of the city, both young and old, from every quarter of Sodom. A furious mob, their voices a rising chorus of depravity, began pounding on the door. Their demand was monstrous and unambiguous. They screamed, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them." The word "know" in this biblical context is a clear and chilling euphemism for brutal sexual assault. This was a city consumed by its lusts, a ravenous crowd ready to violate the sacred code of hospitality by attacking foreign guests. In a moment of sheer panic, Lot went outside, shutting the door behind him to protect his guests. He tried to reason with the mob, appealing to their non-existent sense of decency, begging them not to commit such a vile act. In an act of profound desperation that is difficult for modern minds to comprehend, he even offered his own 2 virgin daughters to the crowd to appease their rage. But his plea was met with scorn and derision. "This fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge," they jeered. "Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Just as the violence was about to erupt, as the mob surged forward to break down the door, the 2 angels acted. They reached out, pulled Lot back inside the house, and bolted the door shut. Then a terrifying miracle occurred. They struck the men outside with a supernatural blindness. The mob, now sightless and confused, groped and stumbled in the darkness, unable to find the entrance they had been so intent on violating. The city had crossed its final line. There was no turning back. Inside the now secured house, that same night, the angels revealed to Lot the terrifying truth of their visit. "We are about to destroy this place," they declared, "because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." A tremor of fear shot through Lot. He knew with chilling certainty this was no idle threat. It was a divine decree. He immediately scrambled to find his sons-in-law, the men betrothed to his daughters, and delivered the urgent warning, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But they just laughed at him. They thought he was joking, telling a foolish story. Their hearts were so aligned with the cynical spirit of Sodom that they were incapable of recognizing the sincerity and terror in his voice. Meanwhile, the first hints of dawn were breaking. But this was no ordinary sunrise. The sky seemed unnaturally dark, heavy with an impending doom. Time for Sodom was running out. As the dawn approached, the angels grew more urgent. "Up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city." Yet even then, Lot hesitated. His heart was torn. His entire life was in that city. His home, his possessions, his memories. But the angels would not allow his hesitation to seal his doom. They seized him, his wife, and his 2 daughters by the hand and forcibly led them out of the city. The mercy of God was being extended even in the very midst of judgment. Once outside the city walls, the final command was given, sharp and absolute. "Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, lest you be swept away." Sodom's clock had just struck 0. In a few moments, the first sparks of divine judgment would begin to fall. As dawn broke, the sleeping city was oblivious, but the sky above was already charged with the weight of God's verdict. Lot, his wife, and their 2 daughters were hurried along by the angels. They moved with a desperate speed, their hearts pounding with a mixture of grief and terror, their eyes fixed on the horizon ahead. The command was absolute: flee and do not look back. There was no time for goodbyes, no moment for last-minute regrets. God's long-suffering patience had finally been exhausted, and divine justice demanded to be served. As they fled the city limits, Lot made one last plea. He begged not to have to flee all the way to the mountains, fearing he could not make it. He asked for permission to take refuge in a small nearby town called Zoar. In an act of incredible mercy, his request was granted, and the moment that Lot and his family reached the safety of Zoar, the heavens tore open. It began, a rain not of water but of fire, burning sulfur, the Bible says, rained down from the Lord out of heaven, a storm of incandescent fury that fell without mercy upon Sodom, upon Gomorrah, and upon all the cities of the plain. The hills trembled, the air itself became a searing wind, and the very ground seemed to groan under the Creator's wrath. This was not a partial destruction. It was total. It was final. Everything was consumed. The magnificent houses, the accumulated wealth, the green fields, the livestock, the men, the women, the children. Nothing and no one was spared. But in the midst of this frantic escape, a personal tragedy unfolded, one that has echoed through the ages as a stark warning. Lot's wife, disobeying the divine command, looked back. This wasn't a casual glance. The original Hebrew implies a gaze of longing, of attachment, a silent act of rebellion against God's judgment. Her heart was still in Sodom. She looked back, and in that instant she was transformed into a pillar of salt. There, on the edge of the blasted plain, she stood, a silent, motionless, crystalline monument to the danger of a divided heart, an eternal warning to all who hesitate between salvation and destruction. Lot and his daughters, shaken to their core, pressed forward. They didn't stop. Fearful of what might still come, they eventually left the small town of Zoar and took refuge in a cave high in the mountains. There, alone, as the last survivors of their world, they bore witness to the end of an era. The biblical account spares no detail. It recounts not just the physical cataclysm, but the moral bankruptcy of a civilization that had rejected everything that was just, good, and holy. Later, from a great distance, Abraham himself looked out toward the region where the cities had once flourished. And what he saw was a thick plume of smoke rising from the land, like the smoke of a colossal furnace. It was as if the very earth had been burned to its foundations. The judgment of God was complete. The story doesn't end with a celebration or a victory. It ends in silence, in ash, in a haunting memory. Lot was saved, but everything he had ever known was gone. He was now a stranger in a strange land, a survivor of a story that would become a permanent, iconic warning for all of humanity. Because Sodom and Gomorrah were not just cities, they became a mirror, a reflection of what happens when a world that consistently rejects justice and mercy walks willingly toward its own destruction. Sodom and Gomorrah were obliterated by fire and sulfur that rained down from the sky. For centuries, this account in Genesis resonated as a powerful symbol. But archaeological discoveries over the last 100 years have begun to ask questions that change everything. Could this event have happened physically exactly as the Bible describes? In the desolate, salt-encrusted landscape south of the Dead Sea lie the suspected remains of these ancient cities. The archaeological site of Tal el-Hammam in modern-day Jordan, in particular, has yielded evidence that is nothing short of stunning. The findings point to a single catastrophic event that occurred approximately 3,600 years ago. Scientists working at the site have uncovered a destruction layer about 5 feet thick, containing evidence of an almost unbelievable cataclysm. They found pottery shards whose outer surfaces were melted into glass, building foundations that were completely wiped clean, and human skeletal remains that were blasted apart. What could have caused this? The leading scientific theory points to a massive cosmic airburst. Imagine a meteor or a small asteroid traveling at tens of thousands of miles per hour, entering the atmosphere and exploding with the force of thousands of atomic bombs several miles above the city. This would not leave a crater, but it would create a superheated blast wave of unimaginable power and temperature. The evidence fits this theory perfectly. Researchers found shocked quartz, grains of sand that have been fractured in a unique pattern that can only be formed by an extreme high-pressure impact event. They found microscopic spherules of melted iron and sand. They even found tiny diamond-like particles that could only form under immense heat and pressure. The blast wave would have been followed by a plume of superheated, pulverized material from the asteroid itself, along with anhydrite from the Dead Sea region, which would have rained down as the burning sulfur described in the Bible. The temperatures would have instantly exceeded 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt metal and vitrify pottery, explaining the glass-coated walls and artifacts. These are not just wild speculations. These findings have been peer-reviewed and published in prestigious scientific journals like Nature. They are the work of a multidisciplinary team of archaeologists, chemists, physicists, and geologists. While not every scientist subscribes to the biblical interpretation, the physical evidence for a devastating high-temperature top-down destruction event is undeniable. Something extraordinary and apocalyptic happened there. Beyond the destruction itself, the very existence of the Dead Sea today stands as a silent testimony. It is the lowest point on the surface of the earth, a body of water so dense and hypersaline that it cannot sustain any complex life. It is a place of death. It's as if nature itself still bears the scar of that divine judgment. In the New Testament, Jesus Christ himself refers to Sodom and Gomorrah on more than one occasion. He warns that on the day of judgment, it will be more tolerable for those cities than for those who hear the truth and reject it. Their destruction, therefore, is not merely a historical event in the distant past. It is a prophetic warning for the future. Sodom and Gomorrah became the eternal symbols of what happens when humanity defies its creator, when it rejects justice, and when it scoffs at mercy. They were judged by fire, but their legacy continues to burn to this day. The fire that fell from heaven didn't just consume the land. It branded history, it branded the Bible, it branded science, and it continues to brand our conscience. So, where is Sodom today? What is the lasting legacy of a place erased by fire? Today, the land where Sodom and Gomorrah are believed to have stood is shrouded in a heavy, oppressive silence. Nothing grows there. No life thrives. The Dead Sea region, spanning southern Israel and Jordan, remains one of the most inhospitable places on the planet. Its waters are so salty that no fish can survive. The air is thick. The ground is sterile, as if the very environment retains the memory of a divine sentence. Visitors to the area can find bizarre salt formations, some of which eerily resemble human figures, as if the desert itself has frozen scenes of the tragedy in time. Many local traditions hold that one of these prominent salt pillars is the remains of Lot's wife, eternally fixed for her backward glance. While there is no definitive proof, the powerful image serves as a potent visual reminder of a story that refuses to die. And the work continues. Recent archaeological expeditions are still unearthing the remnants of this incinerated civilization. Melted materials, destroyed structures, and accumulating evidence that something supernatural, or at least something beyond any normal explanation, occurred in that region. These are not just legends, they are traces in the dirt, scars on the land, open wounds in a place that was once called a garden, but is now utterly barren. But perhaps the most important question is not, where was Sodom? The real question is, are we living in it now? Jesus, when speaking of the end times, made a chilling comparison. He said that the days of the coming of the Son of Man would be just like the days of Lot. People were eating and drinking, buying and selling, planting and building. Life seemed perfectly normal, right up until the day Lot left Sodom, and fire and sulfur rained down from heaven and destroyed them all. The great, enduring lesson of Sodom and Gomorrah is this: God's judgment can seem distant right up until the moment it arrives. Sin can seem normal right up until the bill comes due, and mercy can seem infinite, but it does have a limit. Sodom was destroyed because it rejected truth, because it mocked holiness, and because it institutionalized evil as a way of life. And that is the warning that echoes across millennia to reach us today. But within that dire warning, there is also a message of hope. Lot was saved. He hesitated. Yes, he was flawed, but he was pulled to safety. He was protected because there was still one righteous man in that wicked city, and God will never sweep away the righteous with the wicked. This is the choice that every generation and every individual must make: to look forward toward salvation or to look back toward destruction, to flee for your life or to remain in a world that is already under sentence. Sodom is not just a city of the past. It is a mirror for the present and perhaps a shadow of the future. If you have journeyed with us this far, through the fire and the ash, and back to the present day, it means this message has resonated with you. It means you understand the gravity of this story and are aware of the times we are living in. Here on our channel, we are dedicated to uncovering these profound truths, to exploring the mysteries that connect our world to the ancient scriptures. If you believe this work is important, if you want to be part of a community that seeks truth without fear, then we invite you to subscribe. Click that bell icon so you never miss an investigation, and share this video with someone you care about, because the truth must be proclaimed before judgment comes. Join us as we continue to explore the stories that shaped our world and hold the keys to our future.